Today, on this podcast episode, I'm going to share with you my secret to calming down the worst meltdowns. So, if you have a child who melts down often or very intense with aggression, with hitting, with kicking, with yelling, with throwing their bodies to the floor, with it's over the top, anywhere, in public, in private, at bedtime, in the morning, in the car, you you've tried so many things, all the way from warnings to trying to offer a hug and nothing helps. This podcast episode is for you because I'm going to share with you the secret sauce to calming the worst meltdowns. And this secret sauce is based on research. Once you're done with this podcast episode, you will know exactly how to show up for your child. So, meltdowns are not a part of your day to day routine. They're not as often. And when they come, they're not as long, as intense, and as frequent either. Hello, welcome to this episode of the Parenting with Understanding podcast. This is your host, Marcela Collier. I'm a certified parenting coach and founder of HIC Parenting Education Agency. My team of coaches and I have helped 14,151 parents work away or move away from reactivity so they can become secure parents for their children. And that's my mission with this podcast as well, to give you the inspiration, tools, skills, information so you can bring transformation to your parenting, so you can show up as a secure parent for your children. Before we talk about this secret sauce to calming the worst meltdowns, if you've been listening to the Parenting with Understanding podcast for a while, that means that you've been enjoying it. So I encourage you to open the description and leave us a 5-star positive review. Hopefully, that will help us get to more parents. So, what is the secret sauce? According to research, to nervous system science, personal attunement is the secret sauce of calming the worst meltdowns. And don't worry if you're like, what is personal attunement, Marcela? Break it down for me. Like, give me the practical aspect of this. Yes, we're going there, but that's the word that research uses. Personal attunement. Have you ever seen your child? If you're listening to this, is because you have in a really big aggressive meltdown. Well, I experienced those too because I'm an autism mom. Yes, my son, he's 9 years old. He's autistic, ADHD, and then he's had really bad meltdowns all his life. And I think one of the worst meltdowns was like 3 days ago. A matter of fact, that inspired me to teach on this topic. So, what happened? 3 days ago, by the way, if I sound congested, it's because I am. We have COVID. So he has COVID. He had COVID three days ago. He was stuffy. He was miserable. When he is sick, his sensory needs are high up. They skyrocket to the roof because he's already a very sensory kiddo. Things that bother him in his senses, in his body, he manifests it in a very high, intense way. And when he's stuffy, when he has a fever, when he doesn't feel good, it's even worse. So it was bedtime and he started getting very agitated. And I understood and I knew that he was getting agitated and anxious when his father and I asked him to go to bed and he refused to get in bed. He refused to get in bed and instead he went to get one of our kitties and he started petting one of our kitties. We told him again, and then he kept petting one of our kitties. And at that point, he started getting more agitated. Well, long story short, that was a very intense meltdown. Yes, after that, it followed a really big meltdown. that ended up with him basically sleeping next to me on the couch, and I transferred him in the middle of the night to his bed. But then something that happened really made me think about, like, wow, like that's the difference between handling a meltdown and battling a meltdown. My other son, he's twin, yes, they're twins. He's neurotypical and he had COVID as well. And even though he was uncomfortable, he was able to stay in bed and remain in bed. And then he looked at us and then he said, how come I'm able to stay in bed and Santi he cannot stay in bed? And that's when I started noticing, oh, wow. Like, what is it about my neurotypical son or my non autistic son who allow him to be in bed and stay in bed, even though he felt as sick as my other son? And it had to do with individual differences. The way that my non autistic son processes sickness is not the same way as my autistic son processes sickness because of an individual difference called sensory needs. My autistic son has high sensory needs, so feeling stuffy and having fever and coughing feels a lot more overwhelming than my non autistic son. So he had me reflect about that with that question. And then everything, and that question, that reflection that I had at that moment allowed me to change the trajectory of everything I did from that point forward. I thought for a second and I told my non autistic son, I said, you know what? It's because Santi has special needs. He has a different set of needs that you don't have. You are able to tolerate stuffiness and a fever in a calmer way than Santi. Santi's nervous system's fire alarms are going off a little bit harder just because his brain processes sensory information a little bit different. His nervous system is hyper reactive to sensory experiences. And then that reflection, I'm so happy and so glad that my non autistic son asked me that question because he helped me reflect on what I was doing up until that moment. Up until that moment, I was handling meltdowns with cookie cutter approaches that most parents do. The child refuses to get in bed, and then I go and I remind them that it's time for bed. The child ignores and pets the kitty and doesn't go to bed, and then the parent repeats themselves. That's basically what I was doing. I was telling him, it's time to go to bed. It's late. It's time for bed. You can pet Lola tomorrow. You can play with your kitties tomorrow. Your brother is already in bed. But that did not help. Why didn't it help? Because it didn't talk directly to his need. So the secret to calming down the worst meltdowns is personalized attunement. And this has three components. Personalized attunement has three components. And I'm going to share with you how I handle those. I'm going to drink water, otherwise, I'm going to cough having COVID. Element number one is prioritizing the child's feelings and the child's sense of safety. The starting point when we address a meltdown, it should always be what the child is feeling and needing at that moment. The child's sense of safety always first, not compliance. And that's where most parents miss it, not because they want to miss it, but because they lack this knowledge. They put compliance first when we need to place first is prioritizing the child's feelings and sense of safety. That's element one of personalized attunement. So I went to where my son was, and he was still petting the kitty, and I say, Santi, I know you're so stuffy, you're miserable. I told you 3 times to go to bed. Is there something about being in bed that is maybe making you feel uncomfortable or anxious? And then he looked at me and then he said, I had to lay down. If I lay down, I'm going to choke up in my own boogers and not being able to breathe. So, do you see? When you have personalized attunement, you can speak to the need instead of being caught up on just addressing a behavior, because the behavior is just an effect, it's just the byproduct of a need. We just address the behavior, we miss the need, and then the behavior continues, the meltdown doesn't end. So at that point, he was very escalated. He was anxious about going to bed. And I said, okay, Santi, so what could help you? And then my husband and I started gathering all the pillows that we could find in the house. And we made like we propped all the pillows up so he could basically go to bed and sit up. And that he could sit on his bed and fall asleep that way instead of laying down. But this is the thing. He tried, but his triggers were so overpowering for him that he couldn't hold that. He couldn't meet that expectation. A lot of the times, parents hold on to these expectations, and that's when anxiety comes for the parent. But we need to get him in bed. It's time to go to bed. It's almost 10. It has to be this way because children need to go to bed early and he's sick. These expectations, when the child is not able to meet those expectations, take parents to react. Take parents to take it personal. Take parents to enter the cycle of control. I need to drink water again. So, what is the cycle of control? The child doesn't comply. The parent explains the reason. The child doesn't comply again. Now the parent is very agitated. And then they try to control by announcing consequences, by announcing bribes, or by yelling. But then what happens to the child's emotional landscape? Because they were triggered in the first place. Everybody ends the night not feeling safe and disconnected. So I let go of the expectation of we need to get in bed and go to bed when I noticed my son was so triggered that even sitting in bed did not help. So the second element of personalized attunement is addressing the causes and triggers and the underlying the behavior. I got him out of the bed because he was not helping, and plus he was keeping his brother up. They sleep in the same bedroom. And then he started pacing back and forth in the living room. And at the same time, I started thinking about how can I address the causes and triggers underlying this behavior? Because the problem is never the behavior. The problem to solve is never the meltdown. The problem to solve is never eliminating a behavior. Is addressing the root cause, the need that is driving the behavior. So my husband and I were just looking at him and troubleshooting. And then there was something that came up. When a child is in a meltdown, because that's, at that point, that was a meltdown. A meltdown is an emotional crisis. It's not a misbehavior. It's an emotional crisis caused by stress. And he was having a lot of stress with all those boogers, having COVID. So, what could help a child during such a big triggering moment? There is only one thing at that particular moment, at that particular stage of the meltdown, pacing back and forth, very anxious. He was already crying at that point, and it's one thing: sense of safety. So, safety is not the absence of threat. Safety is the perception that a child or a person has of their own sense of safety, if that makes sense. The environment was safe. My husband and I were safe. We were not yelling, we were not threatening, we were calm. But his neuroception of safety, neuroception is his perceived safety, was not there because he was thinking about how am I going to go to sleep? I'm so tired. He was so tired. He was so tired. He knew he needed to go to sleep, but he didn't know how. So he didn't have a sense of safety, a perceived sense of safety. When you are addressing your child's meltdowns, the first thing, and this is something that I missed in the very beginning, the first thing is to bring that child back to a sense of safety. And that only happens through co regulation. So, what is co regulation? Have you ever heard about letting your children self soothe or teach them to calm themselves down? They cannot do that. A child can self soothe if they're happy. Have you ever seen a baby in a crib happily playing with their feet or cooing or playing with their fingers? They're self soothing and they can because they're happy. But when they're not happy, they cannot. They cannot self soothe. And that is true for babies and for children, especially autistic kids. So, co regulation is borrowing our calm and through coping strategies, helping our children feel safe. Hear my words. I said feel safe. I didn't say calm down. And that's what I see a lot of parents who even come to coaching in HIC parenting telling me, my child doesn't come down with me. I'm the worst parent. There is something wrong with me. There is nothing wrong with you. It's that your priorities or your expectation is on your child calming down, and that's not the goal. It's out of your control when they're gonna calm down. So the priority is for them to feel safe, even through their dysregulation. I sat him on the couch. I didn't even mention going to the bedroom. And I know that tickles helps him. So I tickle him, and I was falling asleep too because I wasn't feeling right either. I had COVID too, and I still have. And I did that until about midnight. Midnight. At midnight, he finally fell asleep, and I transferred him to his bedroom. The meltdown was long, intense, but in every stage of his meltdown, he felt safe. For me and for neuroscience, that is a successful intervention of a meltdown. A successful intervention of a meltdown is not when the child calms down fast or easy. It's when the child feels safe at all times. Does your child feel safe at all times during their meltdowns? Or do you become reactive at some point? If that is you, give yourself a lot of empathy. You're not alone. The parents who come to HIC parenting, they're all trying to break away from reactivity. And there is hope. There is a system that I created, the Parenting with Understanding system, that has served 14,151 parents going from reactive to emotionally attuned and secure for their children during those hard moments. I explain in depth this system in our free class that you can access right now. To access it, all you have to do is go to our Instagram at High Impact Club, High Impact Club. DM me the words class 25. No, hold on. No, not class 25. Sorry. Peace 25. Peace 25. The words Peace 25. And then I'll send you the link to access this class. Because the first and biggest thing that you can do to calm the worst meltdowns is for you to show up as a secure parent through your child's dysregulation until they calm down. Not when you need it, not when you want it, when their nervous system calms down. So when a child feels truly safe, guess what starts to happen naturally? They start to engage with us and calm down. But they don't calm down when we apply a strategy or a tool or we say a certain thing, but when they feel safe with us. So they feel safe with us when we transfer that safety, not just through our words, but through our body language and through our posture, through everything in our being. Our children are our biggest judges. Yeah, they are our judges. They can read through the lines if we are speaking calmly and feeling triggered versus we are truly secure and regulated and connected. Matter of fact, if you are feeling triggered, then go to the class first. But then the first thing to address your child's meltdown successfully is to work in yourself, because you cannot place an oxygen mask on them if you are drowning with them. They rely on your sense of safety to feel safe. So triage your children's behaviors and see, hey, is this my child having a hard time with something? Is this my child starting a meltdown because they don't feel safe about something? Because when you start with that in the front line, you don't place compliance as on the front line. Relationship, emotional safety in the relationship, personal attunement is the secret to calming down the worst meltdowns. If you like this podcast episode, would you share it with a friend? Just share it with a friend. Let them know, hey, I know this could help you. And it helped me as well. And I want to tell you that it only takes understanding of your children's needs and of your needs to raise secure children. I'll see you next time.